Welcome to the very first session of this series, the beginning of an exciting journey of ideas, insights, and inspiration. To get us started, we have someone who's been at the forefront of building and scaling communities around the world. Ed Giansante, Head of Community at Persona. So, Ed has built thriving programs at Dropbox, Wix, Zynga, and VMware. Today, he'll share how AI and human connection can come together to make communities smarter, inclusive, and truly engaging. Over to you, Ed.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. How's everyone doing? Good morning in this rainy day in San Francisco. Let me share my screen and we can get started. Is everyone feeling good? Yeah. All right. Let's see where we are. Done. Cool. Okay, so let me make sure that you can all see here and we're good to get started here. Excited to talk about this topic because it's been top of mind, I think, from very different angles, but top of mind for a lot of us. I guess we have a lot of questions that we want to get to answers. And I want to start with like the simplest one. I think we're getting there, right? It's happening. It's coming to the point where we don't know what's AI, what's not. So I think what I want to share here is maybe two things. One, something that we've been doing wrong for a long time as community managers, and I include myself in it. I guess, you usually you benchmark against your peers, and then if someone is not going through the right path, and then you kind of like go through that same path, you end up like creating this mass motion that everyone goes through the same. And I guess we've been doing a few things wrong. But before we get into that, and I'll share that in a minute and how we fix that, I want to give you like a little perspective on the AI landscape. For you all who have been in San Francisco or the Bay Area, this is probably the place where you see AI everywhere. You see them in billboards, you see discussions, you go to events, and they're all about AI. There may be 60 to 70 meetups happening per week in the city that are all about AI. And then there's everything, like really everything you talk about, you include the word AI and it becomes a thing. So I start to look at like where we are with this. Like, does that feel like a bubble? Are we going somewhere with it? So if you look at some of the data here, you'll be surprised to see how much more money is being poured into AI. That's more than, I don't know, 50 or X or more in what is being spent in like SaaS, for example. And then if you look at the narratives, there are usually two main narratives. And I'm going to bring the two extremes here. Don't feel that you have to resonate with either because they're two extremes. One extreme is there's an AI war. We need to win this war because China is building data centers and they're building better infrastructure for energy and all of that. And then we need to pour more money and make this happen faster. And this is a very strong narrative for companies, right? Because obviously, if the government gets involved, if there's like this sentiment of like being a war and Americans loving to win wars, there's always this like, let's pour more gas. So in other words, let's pour more money in it. And who wins with that? Whatever company that's building needs that money, right? So that's why you see this disparity of the volumes in money. And there's the other narrative, which is the other extreme, which is like AGI, AI is taking over. They're stealing all our jobs and they're creating these robots that will control our homes. And what happens if this get hacked and then they destroy everything and they start to think by themselves and there's going to be a war of AI versus humans and AIs are here to take over the humans, yada, yada, and all of that. And like, I'm scared. We should stop this right now. There's no guardrail. And this extreme is obviously they're like, we don't want to accept or we don't want to convert into like the AI adopters or we don't want to see AI. In both extremes, you have the pros and cons. I'm not saying you should have one or the other, but it's just give you a perspective that thinking AI may be scary for some people because it's a new thing they have to adopt. It may change how you work, how you think. If you're just as old as me, you'll probably remember that this happened in the bubble in 2000. It also happened when phones became a thing. Everyone was like, phones are the next thing. Mobile phones are the next thing. You're going to stop using your desktop. and then you move on, and then you get into different things where like social media is now taking over, and then you have social media, and then you're like, oh, it's no longer TV, it's YouTube, you have to shift. So this is going to be forever changing, and I guess the point here is to see that this is massive. It's not like a small thing. And then that comes with something else that I was looking at. So this is a funny one, because I was looking at the data that we had for community overall. One of the very interesting things that I saw is that not only we're moving into this era where like, hey, let's think AI, but we've been shrinking as a team. We're like smaller, not only smaller, but we're dealing with like smaller medians in terms of like company sizes, the team sizes, resources. Interesting enough, in 2018, that's the latest I could find, like, or maybe the oldest I could find as an actual report that was pulled by, I think it was Community Roundtable, that there were 0% of community managers who didn't have a full-time person. So that person was either the full-time themselves or they had like someone else full-time. Where now 17% of the community managers, so people like us, they have absolutely zero full-time staff. So not only that, again, as I mentioned, we're reducing the number, like the median size of the teams. So we're shrinking, but there's expectations that we do more. And not only that, I think we've been doing a lot of things like that. I can resonate a lot. Tell me if that makes you feel like this is you, where we did adopt AI. We're like, hey, let's go for it. You know, AI is a thing. But then you get to that like last mile where you cannot deploy. You're like, oh my God, what's going on here? And what we see is that the more you get used to it, the more you start learning it, it feels like the harder it gets, because the more you expect for it to give you like the right outcome, and it's never that last mile. Like there's something missing at that very end. So this can be sometimes frustrating for us. It can be something that like pushes us back and be like, I don't know, I know it's not sure, like I'm trying, you know, but it's not getting to what I want. It feels M dashes are everywhere on ChatGPT, everything looks fake, and you can get concerned with that. But I feel that there's something else that, again, looking back from almost a decade ago, and I can tell this has been like forever like this, is that we've been looking at the wrong metric. And I guess this is my point here. And my point being, looking at the wrong metric will always be a challenge, because no matter what the discussion is, today is going to be AI, but tomorrow it can be something else. It can be humanoids. I don't know. It can be going to Mars, whatever it is. We're always going to be challenged because we've been looking at the wrong metric. And it's maybe time to rethink about this, because we're getting closer to a point where if you're not doing it, and it can be like if you're just doing operations of the work, or if you're just thinking about the metrics but not the outcomes, you probably end up not being as relevant to the market as you were maybe a few years ago. So I don't know if you agree, like, but I'd love to hear from y'all. Like, how do you feel about the metric we've been chasing, and if that makes sense, if that's still the right metric? Again, this is the number one pain point. Like, oh, my pain point with communities, I cannot drive engagement. I'm not getting more engagement. And it's been the word we hear forever in community. And again, don't know how long you've been in this market, but it's been for like forums where like, hey, we're setting up this forum, and then I don't know, chorus, like, hey, chorus will help us get more engagement. And then social media get us engagement. They're like, no, this is social media, this is not community. And then it became community everywhere, but then engagement's still a problem. And then there's like a whole book about engagement trap. It's been forever. Like, engagement has been forever a challenge. And I will challenge you to now stop thinking a little bit about engagement, think about more outcomes. And I'll get to that in a second. But just I want to make sure that you're with me here. I've seen some people posting in the chat. I'll try and follow, but it's hard because the chat is like kind of coming up on the side of the screen. It's not necessarily like in front of me. Now, as we talk about this, I think we're at the point now where if you create like a video on Sora 2, or if you created like an image on Gemini, it will be very hard for you to tell this is real or this is not real. You tell me if this picture that I took in India a few years back is real or not. In the meantime, you can see 60% of the Americans don't know if they're interacting with AI or not. And I want to kind of challenge you all on this. I think it kind of doesn't matter if you know or not know, as long as you're getting to the outcome. And it may sound controversial for us community folks, but hear me out here, like, and see if this makes sense. um there's been like a long time of community managers who have forums where people go there for help and they want to get a fast response. And we know by data that we've analyzed that the faster you get your response, the more likely it is that you choose that channel. And I'll explain this for you. So think like that. Usually when a community manager is working in a big company where there's a lot of volume of questions coming in, support questions, you're kind of like competing with the entire support channel that you have. So there may be a chat, there's maybe like an email support, there's maybe phone support. And as long as your community can be faster than the support and as accurate or like providing the right answers that an agent would provide, that's when you start to see the shift. I did that with Dropbox for 5 years, 4.5 years, for Zynga for 4 years, for Wix, for a lot of companies. And it's always the same. If you provide better or faster answers in your community, people will gravitate towards that because that's where you can get the immediate responses. So now we're at the point where like immediate responses is kind of like a given, right? You get immediate responses in almost everywhere. You barely get into websites now. You literally type on Google, there's an AI response. If you go to ChatGPT, there's a beautiful response. So it's kind of like, you know, you're not interacting with a human, but you're getting the answer you need and it's being faster. How many of us have like good friends on ChatGPT because they're just helping us get to the answers? Do you matter whether this is like a person or not, whether this is like real or just like AI made? I think it's getting to the point where like, I don't know if it really matters if it's not authentic, as long as it's giving me the answer that I need. And for a lot of us, it's being like that. So keep that in your mind, because I'm going to get into like more specifics now. Because again, as I said, we've been looking at this wrong metric. And if we start to think about the outcomes, we can get to something like this. So again, let's think about first support deflection. It's been there forever. It's been a metric that, I don't know, I think in 2010, I remember talking to like Rich and David, like about like metrics like support deflection. It's been on forever, like even Brian and all, I think you all will see them talking about it. It's been the topic that's been there forever. And there was the concern of like, hey, we need to build more ambassadors, more community advocates so they can help us and then can provide like right answers and all of that. And then there were some attempts to create like bots or tools that would give autoresponders, and then they were not necessarily as good or as empathetic and so on and so forth. But now you can get that. You can get like amazing answers that feels pretty realistic, pretty good, like feels pretty natural language, feels pretty human. I know they even compliment you. They're like, hey, great question. And that's, again, if that gives me the answer, does it really matter? Again, think about like communities where, and again, I'll share like the Dropbox example again. We had, I don't know, 1,000+ questions a day. Even if I had the largest army of community advocates or ambassadors, it would be impossible for me to answer all of these questions. So if I'm like looking at this today, I'd be like, I'm definitely setting up AI to get me like to the answers faster. And there's always going to be an edge case where that can be escalated, and that's fine. But that's like a small fraction of the whole thing. Because if you think about questions that are coming in, they're usually the same. They're just framed differently because people think my case is pretty unique, and it's not pretty unique. It's more of the same. So kind of want to bring you to that like discussion and support system. I think that's one point. Then you have product adoption. Again, nothing new here. Again, I'll bring the example of Dropbox again, because this is something that I did there that made sense at the time. When Dropbox was getting started and we had like high volume of customers, we had like, I don't know, 300 million, 400 million customers. There were too many edge cases. It was too hard to understand, who is trying what, who's trying to do different things here, and what's happening that's unique about this use case, about this person and using this device at this company size. So it gets harder to personalize and to understand that pain point to get their feedback. And then feedback tends to be generic because we just don't have the resources or the time to create like this unique, feedback loop for like each individual or each cohort or each kind of like use case. But now, again, if you think about product adoption and thinking about how people are, understanding or using your product, you can be more personalized. And I'll give you some examples of what we do today with Persona. We have an onboarding that's very personalized for people based on information we collect from them, based on their location, the team size, the company size. because before we give them the onboarding, which is has like this preset, let's say tracks, I'll call like tracks, meaning these are the things you should do so you get started with our product. We also enrich their data before that. We go into like Clearbit, and then we enrich a lot of the data based on the customer email, domain, the LinkedIn, and we look at all these attributes, and then we customize these tracks to feel unique to them. And then we send that track loop into like a Slack DM to them, like in sequencing. So that's one example of onboarding. But you can create more of that, and you can get better, like in product adoption. And what's the metric you look at? You're like, hey, are they actually getting to the points that I'm flagging them to do? Are they adopting certain features? Are they asking for upgrades or about certain features that we've just released? Is this happening? And then third is, and again, this is just the three things that I feel matters the most. And the third one is very important as well. It's revenue. If there's one metric that you can share with anyone in your company that they will always understand is money. Are we making money or are we saving money? Hey, we're making money. And I think making money is better than saving money at this point in time in 2025. And how do you help make money? How do you make more money for the company with your community? You essentially look at pipeline. You look at like people who are using community, they have a more likelihood to adopt, upgrade, ask for things, get more people in their seat systems. If you have like a seat based, or if it's a usage based, and you can use your community with AI for that. You can essentially look at like, am I tracking here? Who are my top members? Am I looking at the signals I can get from tools like, Common Room or even Play? It can be Clearbit as well, whatever it is. Or if you run like activities that are more pragmatic, like events, workshops, and so on, can you look at all this data and help form a buyer journey with your community that will then feed into a pipeline for the sales team to work on? The more you get better at this, the more you can look at this and create attributions, and we can talk about attributions later, the more you can see that there's an outcome related to your community efforts. So again, it gets better for you. It gets better because you start to make a difference there. Now, I'm talking a lot, and I know this was like maybe a kind of like a dense point here, but let me kind of like go back into thinking about AI and you or your team. I tried to create like a very simple version of like what a Venn diagram would look like for what things you could maybe outsource to AI and which things you should maybe retain as your kind of unique advantage, like the more human aspect of things. And I guess a lot of what we used to call before like community operations, I feel that they're like either 100% or 99% AI replaceable. Like you can essentially put AI to do all of that. And that can be, any routine tasks, anything that's like checking a few things here, running certain reports, getting that like first response. I have a first responder that I created on Slack. Our community is on Slack. So because Persona is quite technical, but it can be very unique because it's kind of compliance related. It's not necessarily like so specific to like, if you need A, the answer is B. It's almost like if you're A123, the answer could be B64. I don't know. It can be pretty open in that. So I need that first response to be almost like a diagnosis. I need to understand a little bit more of what's going on before I can point that customer somewhere. So there's an AI that I created using Dust and then our own resources. That's an agentic. And then what it will do is, as you ask the question, first you will analyze, is this an actual question, or this is just a comment, or just like an observation or praise, whatever. If yes, it understood that through LLM that this is a question. Then it's like, is this related to Persona? What are the resources that we have that can validate that? And then it will only respond whether there's a match to like, hey, this question matches to documentation we have. And then third is, what's the tone that they're using? And then reflect that same tone to give back the answer in the same tone that they used. If it's like long technical, give them a long technical response. If they're like short, snappy answers. And then always look at the last resource as being contact support. If we try and troubleshoot through this AI and then like feels like they're not happy at all, they're like using any kind of like words or sentiment that feels they're not happy or they need something more immediately, flag that to support so support can take care of that. So just by doing that, I'm able to get this to the scale of thousands of customers asking the same question or different questions in their unique ways. So this is an example again to you. And there's the intersection between both, right? So I guess it's a mix of what I'm sharing with like some of the things you can do already. It depends on your product. If you're like a B2C, we're a B2B, so we talk to brands, and then they usually come with like a whole team talking to us, where if you're talking to end users, it's usually unique to like that individual. It's not like a whole company or like a team coming to you, right? Is it making sense? I definitely not following the chat here. It's massive, but I hope it's making sense. But having said that, and knowing that we're like reducing the resources, knowing that we understand a little bit about the metrics, how do we think AI first? How do we think of the AI methodology? And this is like a very common thing that's happening here with a lot of different businesses. And you probably have seen in the news where companies, they come and say like, hey, we're not going to hire now. You have to figure out how to do it with AI before we hire. I don't think it's any different for us. I think it's actually, we are in a better position because we know so much about community already. And looking at AI as more like extensions of what we do is better. So again, let's go back to one of the pain points of like, hey, we engagement issues and I don't have enough resources. How can you use AI today? And if you don't know if there's a tool, you can use research on like Perplexity or ChatGPT, whatever. Go for deep research, and then look at like, what's my pain point here? What I'm trying to achieve. I'm pretty sure you all know some of the things you're trying to achieve, and you can like do some research on the AI tools. That will give you like maybe some initial output. Like, hey, try this, try that, and then try and build something on that. Like, don't if there's an existing tool, yeah, go for it, But if there isn't, try and build something. You can try and vibe code it. You don't need to vibe code it something that's going to be perfect. It's just for you to validate certain things. And then if you feel it's working, maybe you need to get into the next stage there. Like, hey, it's working, but I need more complexity. That's when you start to think about a human. So this mentality is like, stop asking for just humans. Like, I need to hire more people. I need more people on board. I need this and this and that. What can you do to like offload from you or like help you get to where you want to be? And then once you validate that and you see the outcome, you move into like, now I need to make my ask. And that's when you look like for resources. And again, I'll give you another example here with Persona, because it's a complex product. I was like, I need to build some sort of like academy to teach people how to use Persona. And that's like 2 years old. That's before Sora or any of that. So I got into HeyGen, and I was like, I don't know anything about compliance. I can't create the content myself. I started to look at like our help resources and look at like, what's the sequencing here, like for someone to get started with Persona. And I got that content, started to hop that into LLM. So it was ChatGPT at the time. I was like, hey, can you help me formulate this as like in a format of like a lesson instead of just being an article that helps with certain specific things. And then I did that for each of this like main articles. And then I created like a video on HeyGen for each of them. It was like, hey, it's lesson number 1. Here's what you do. How you start create like a sandbox account. Here's how you request production access. Here's how you implement your first solution. Here's how you validate your solution. All of this was all AI. Like, was AI looking at the help content, converted into like a lesson style. That HeyGen created like a video that looks like me, kind of like me, 2 years old. It's not as good, and that made it happen. And the academy is live, and then it helps, I don't know, like 1,000 of people like every month, and helps us because the more people learn like the basics, the questions become more specific to like their edge cases and something that the support team can help with, or even the sales team can help with, because they're like, hey, we tried all this, but then there's a feature here that says limited. Can I get access to it? You're like, sure, that's a paid feature, and it generates that like upgrade. So again, I started with AI first, got it to a point where like it's fully working, and now I outsource this to like a specific team at Persona that handles this, updates. They still use AI, but it's like they're managing it. It's not me anymore. So it's again just an example of like what you can do to kind of keep growing on that. Okay. I kind of want to get into like, I think we're getting to the end of the time here, and I want to make sure I address like any potential questions that you may have. So I want to give you like 3 action items instead of giving you like 3 takeaways. I want to give you 3 action items that are things you can do today. Maybe some of you are like way ahead of this. Feel free to share here like a few other things you've been doing. I'd love to see that. But I guess a lot of you, and again, this is coming from talks to like fellow community managers. A lot of you are like kind of like stuck in that mode of like, I use ChatGPT a lot for maybe content creation, maybe to help me with certain things, maybe fix here and there, but I haven't built a workflow yet, or haven't built like an agentic yet. Maybe you haven't used like in a deep search yet. So there's probably like a little bit of that. So for you, I think that would make sense. So first, thinking about support deflection, if you have that, like questions are coming in, can you set up something like Dust? Dust is the agentic that I use. And then I feed that off my own content, like the documentation that we have, the support documentation. And then I, on top of that, in the assistant, and that could be like this, but can be like ChatGPT, can be Claude. I use my own personality. So it's like, how would Ed address this question? How would Ed be empathetic to this person and feel like it's me talking to them? That's more because I don't want to I don't want to trap them, like, pretend it's me. They will know it's an AI eventually, but it's more like, does it feel more natural if I do that? And probably yes. And I mean, so far it's been a good exercise for me. So that's one. Second, on the product adoption, again, if you think about, can I look at my existing data and then find like an action item that I can implement? I guess it will depend on the community platform you use and how you collect that information today, but you can try that as well. And then for revenue retention, and I think that's like, that to me has been like the one that I feel is working the best, because that's when I see, when you show the money, that's when you get the best results. And again, to me, it's like doing research, helping me create like this planning for in-person events. And then what's the first touch point? Where do we host this? How do we communicate with them? How do we follow up with them? How do we put that into a Salesforce, lead system, so we can track like results and so on and so forth? So that's like all being done like through like some agentics that I have. So I guess this helps. I hope this helps. And I know we're like on time. I see my hack here already. I'm probably being kicked out. So thank you again, and hope this was helpful.
Thank you. And I'm sure that's a very thoughtful keynote for all our audience to address. AI definitely should scale empathy and not replace it. So that's a great thought to carry to our next session, scheduled on agentic AI in action, building smarter communities.